Doctors calling for its use, others saying there is no evidence it helps in the treatment of COVID-19. Now, there are even threats of legal action if SAHPRA did not authorize the sale of the drug. And to help me unpack this, I'm joined by the former president of the Health Professionals Council of South Africa, Dr. Jose van Zyl, University of KwaZulu-Natal Health Scientist Professor Colleen Aldos, as well as the National Freedom Party Member of Parliament, Ahmed, Sheikh, Imam. We'll get to all of them in a moment to get their views on this. Dr. Letlape, I'll begin with you. Good evening and thank you very much for your time. To some, it seems as though the regulator has succumbed to pressure from lobby groups and other health professionals in making this decision. What is your feeling?
Good evening to you and the listeners. My feeling is, having been in health regulation, regulating the professionals, I was concerned about practitioners that would be using a drug that was not legally registered, because they'd be exposing themselves not only to possible disciplinary action, but if they were sued by the families, they would have no leg to stand on. And having just come through the back of vigilantism and prosecution at a criminal level by the NPA in terms of Professor Bill and the late Dr. Munchi, I would just concerned for professionals. We don't have enough professionals, and I'd hope that they would follow due process and that SAHPRA would come to the party to ensure that doctors are assisted.
SAHPRA says there is enough evidence out there, however, be it anecdotal, that there is use of ivermectin in the black market in order to protect lives, in order to protect the health professionals. Also, as you're saying, they have then resorted to allow it to be used in a controlled setting for compassionate reasons. Is that a good decision?
Given the fact that we live in a pandemic that is taking lives, any medicine that is approved elsewhere that is found to be useful in studies is something that should be considered. But proper application should be made to the authority. What would be concerning is to try and register a medicine through stoking up the public or writing to the president of the country. I hope the professionals will understand that there's due process to protect not only us as a profession, the practice of what we do, but also to protect the public. And I think they need to understand when we're talking about compassionate use, I hope those that prescribe it will ensure that they take informed consent from the patients, they record properly, they ensure that they keep proper clinical records, and they provide the records and reports to SAHPRA so that if this drug works, the evidence can then be collected so that it can be registered fully if it is appropriate.
All right, let's bring in Colleen Aldos here, and she is from the KwaZulu-Natal Healthcare Scientist profession. Colleen, I'll ask the same question to you. The decision made by SAHPRA, is this the correct decision, considering that there is already, however anecdotal, some evidence that the drug is already being used, taken from the black market?
Okay, we don't consider any anecdotal evidence. We have looked at the published data that has come through over the last 6 to 8 months, and there is definitely published data to show the efficacy and safety of this drug. Now, in December, SAHPRA came out with a legal letter almost, saying that it was illegal to prescribe ivermectin. And on the 6th of January, they softened their statement, saying that they would entertain Section 21 applications and research applications. So when we heard yesterday that they were giving us a controlled compassionate access program, we thought it would be a step forward. But actually all it was a tightening up of a request for Section 21 applications. And as the Ivermectin Interest Group, the IIG, we have put in a Section 21 application. We've dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, given all the information required. We have manufacturers lined up, we have distributors lined up, and we have applied to SAHPRA on a Section 21 for use of ivermectin.
Yeah. One of the doctors that are in this particular study, Dr. Andrew Hill, alongside with the FLCCC, say they are aware of about, 13 trials that are ongoing, which would probably be up to about 7,000 people who have been trying this drug. And of course, there are a whole lot of technical issues that come with that. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not even going to attempt to get into that particular process. Is that number, 7,000 people who have been tried with this drug, however, be it with other drugs as well, like hydroxychloroquine, enough of a proof that this drug is effective?
You know, that's a very subjective decision to make. There are 17 trials in Andrew Hill's current meta-analysis. Now, his meta-analysis is a living one. So as trials are published, he adds to them. And what is interesting to see is between Christmas and New Year, he was only reporting on 11 studies. And in 11 studies, everything was shown positive. Earlier viral load dissipation, a lower mortality rate. He added another 6 studies onto that to present for us earlier this month, and the results are still the same. Currently, at that time, he had about 2,500 patients or participants in the study. Yeah. As the study grows, we might reach 7,000 by the end of March. Yeah. But our argument is that there's enough evidence now for SAHPRA to make a type 1 or type 2 error judgment. Either allow the use of ivermectin now at the risk of it being shown to be ineffective later and what the cost would be, and being a safe drug and a cheap drug, the costs would be low. Yeah, yeah. The other side of it, type 2 error would be withholding the drug and it later proves to be effective, which means the cost is at least 48% of lives that could die. So what's being shown so far is at least a 48% reduction in mortality rate. Yeah. So we believe there's enough evidence to make that kind of decision.
All right. Dr. Jose Kapo, what is your feeling on that, that there is enough evidence? About 17 trials that have been conducted. By March, they will amount to about 7,000 people, and they've shown a quick reduction in infection. In fact, in shorter amount of days, I think, when they use about 0.6 mils of the drug, but they've also shown a shorter amount of stay in hospital, and they've reduced mortality by 40%. Is that enough of an argument for us to really allow the use of this drug?
I'm not an infectious disease specialist, but any drug that is being used elsewhere, just like we had hydrochloroquine, we have read remdesivir, should be looked at. I just am concerned when drugs are made illegal, because if you don't legalize them, you can't collect the information. You are then not able to make a proper judgment. So, and you drive things underground. I don't generally believe in banning anything, but scientific rigor is something that we should adhere to. So I am for things being legalized and the professionals that are at the forefront collecting the data properly so that they can ensure that there are no confounding factors, that the studies are properly designed, they have ethics approval if these studies, clinical observations are done properly, so that things are properly recorded and they are reported upon, so that we can know as to whether this is something that is beneficial going forward. So the issue of not legalizing things becomes problematic, because then you drive things underground, you can't collect information. And that is my concern. So I welcome the fact that it's been legalized, but I would urge those that use it to do the right thing in terms of collecting the information, providing the reports, so that we can make more informed decisions about the drug going forward.
All right. National Freedom Party Member of Parliament, Ahmed, Sheikh, Imam, thank you for joining us as well tonight on this debate. SAHPRA, the regulator, has decided to allow doctors to be able to use ivermectin under a compassionate control use program. The doctors are saying, well, that's just another way of tightening measures when it comes to the Section 21 process. What is your feeling?
Totally unacceptable. Let me start off by saying SAHPRA yesterday admitted, first of all, that is no evidence that indicates that there's a risk. This drug is over 40 years in circulation. One of the safest, one of the cheapest you could ever find. That is why they call it the wonder. There's been extensive research that have been done. Over and above the trial, I can assure you, millions of people are using it worldwide. Thousands of them are using it in South Africa. Not a single person has come back with any side effect. Now, the important thing here is this, that SAHPRA themselves are admitting that there is not enough side effects, there's no side effects, there's no risks attached to it. However, there is positive evidence in terms of trials and research that has taken place, but not sufficient. Now, why are we only choosing to go on the basis that there's not enough evidence? Yet, all the trials and the research documents that are unfolding on an hourly basis at the moment, every one of them are reporting positive responses. And all we are saying as the National Freedom Party, people are dying in this country. Yesterday, 700 and some odd again. Why is the National Department of Health and SAHPRA, first of all, not in the forefront? When you first heard there is this drug, Ivermectin, that is producing some result, shouldn't they have been in a hurry to look at, to look and review any data in order to save lives? We don't have any guarantee at this stage that even the vaccines that are coming here is going to work. Until a week ago, there wasn't even an application for registration of this, of the vaccines that are coming here. There's no guarantee it's going to execute. But what we have an assurance and a guarantee is that this particular Ivermectin, the wonder drug, is having positive results all over the world. The NIH in the United States, who were not in agreement with it before, have now relaxed them. This is also essential drugs on the FDA and the World Health Organization as well. Yeah. The other thing is this, it has been used in South Africa for human use. It may not have been registered for human use, and that admission came from SAHPRA themselves. So the question is, why are you now going and putting a laborious task and expecting doctors who are inundated with calls from patients? You're expecting them to complete 7 to 8 page documentation, pay an application fee, then you want a report. We don't have a problem with it being dispensed by doctors and medical experts. Yes, indeed. Over 700 medical practitioners in South Africa. Surely, with all the time they have spent to go out there and educate themselves, with the passion they have in serving the people, they can't be wrong. So we are saying, allow the use of this. Yes, we don't have a problem with control, but this, what you're now putting in place, is totally unacceptable. Doctors don't have time to be busy with paperwork all the time. They are passionate about saving lives.
Conversation on the use of Ivermectin as a drug. To help us unpack that conversation, we have with us the president of the former president of the Health Professionals Council of South Africa, Dr. Jose van Zyl, and University of KwaZulu-Natal healthcare scientist Professor Colleen Aldos, as well as National Freedom Party member of Parliament Ahmed Sheikh Imam. Professor Colleen, I'll come back to you, and this is what the Sheikh has also just mentioned. The NIH has updated its status on the use of Ivermectin as a drug to treat COVID-19 from no to a we don't have enough evidence and therefore don't have enough advice for regulators whether to allow it or not. What do we make of that update?
Actually, they were a little bit more positive than that. It was as a result of a presentation by Dr. Hill showing his meta-analysis, as well as a presentation by Dr. Pierre Corey and his colleague, Dr. Marek. They presented their data, and that's what changed the mind of the NIH. And there are countries across the world who have followed suit, or even before that. We've got small countries like Belize and Macedonia, provinces in Argentina, provinces in India, and I believe Australia are also looking at using Ivermectin for COVID.
What about the concerns that they raise around no clarity on the severity of the COVID on those who were tested with the product, the dosage that was used, and whether or not there were other drugs as well that were used with ivermectin?
Okay, so what happens in a meta-analysis is you look at endpoints that all the studies have in common so that you can come up with a decision. So if you've got 17 studies and all of them are measuring death, then you can look at death. If all of them are measuring viral clearance, you can look at that, but they could have lots of different designs around that. So many of the studies had different dosages. Some only gave one dose at the beginning. Some had 5 days of a twice-a-day dose. Others had 5 days of a once-a-day dose. Those kinds of things still need to be ironed out. And that's what happens in a pandemic, is you iron things out. There's been nobody who's yet been found to have an overdose of ivermectin on any of the trials. In fact, what they are saying is the higher the dose, the more effective it is. We've been all the research has been very conservative on the dosages because the dosages so far have been based on those that are worked out for the parasiticide effects of ivermectin.
Right. And Professor, have you yourself been in the process of applying for a Section 21? Have you tried that?
Yes, I'm part of the IIG, the Ivermectin Interest Group, and as a group, we put together a Section 21 application that went into SAHPRA on the 15th of January.
Have they come back to you?
And we applied for both, right?
Have they come back to you?
No, not, well, they did ask us questions last week, and we engaged with them all the time. We responded to their final question last Thursday, and they have not come back to us subsequently. Yeah. We certainly are hoping they will. In today's letter that they sent out, they said there'd be a 24-hour turnaround. We're hoping that that counts for us from today so that we'd get a response by tomorrow.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was coming next to. The other doctors are saying this Section 21 process has been quite laborious. In fact, you're saying you do expect, I think it's a 48-hour turnaround, but they've not been doing that when it comes to ivermectin.
No, they haven't. But in the guidelines that came out today, they've undertaken to give a 24-hour turnaround. And they have said in the guidelines today that if there's an emergency, then the patient can get the drug and permission can still be sought at the same time in parallel.
Yeah. Dr. Jose Klappe, the whole process of Section 21 seemingly quite laborious. Even the Member of Parliament saying that, well, doctors want to save lives and they really will not have time to be filling up piles and piles of paper that will take days before they're even looked at.
I think we must not compound issues. There's a pandemic now, there's an emergency, and you can come up with emergency powers. But the Section 21 is sound everyday practice, where you'd have a drug that is being used off-label. Paperwork is important, because if we do not do the paperwork, we are not going to have the evidence. But it should not be such that you create an administrative burden. So what I hope would be done by SAHPRA would be the fact that practitioners would be allowed to use it, but after using it, they still need to provide the paperwork. So if there's an emergency and people are dying and you are using it in the acute phase for ill patients, then there should be an expedited way where there's a pre-agreement about using it and then providing the documentation. If you are going to be use it for prophylaxis, a different approach would be needed. The dosages would be different. But I think in a pandemic, you should be trusting your professionals that you can use this, but remember, you have a duty to report. So any person that you've given it to, whether you've given it for prophylaxis, you've given it for curative purposes, document the circumstances that you are giving it for and record the outcome of the patient so that we can have cumulative data to be able to make an informed decision going forward. So the fact that there's paperwork should not be an excuse, because the way we practice medicine, it's because of records, because of things that can be proven or not proven, so that your peers can look at what you have done and can make a judgment call on the validity of what you have done. If there are no records, there's nothing to look at. Yeah. If you look at what has just happened with the report from the Ombudsman about Tembisa Hospital and the person that passed away, there were no records. So records are critical in the practice of medicine. It protects you as a practitioner, it protects the patient, but it gives us information so that we can make informed decisions going forward, and we can then make, if this drug is the wonder drug that it is purported to be, the evidence will be accumulated and it will be made readily available to all of us.
Ahmed, paperwork is important for health professionals. What's your response?
Well, yes, indeed. We don't have a problem in terms of that. The problem we have is this. We know we have a crisis. We have a pandemic before us. Now, this is an extraordinary situation, so you need extraordinary measures. Now, given the fact that there is evidence that this particular drug is working, there is no doubt about its safety, its effectiveness. There is no dispute about that. The question that arises is, why is it that after I've made repeated calls to the National Department of Health and to SAHPRA to intervene, who were saying nothing about this drug, despite the fact that we know and understand the serious situation we have in terms of healthcare in South Africa? Now, only when I send them a letter from my attorneys demanding, because I failed with the National Department of Health and with SAHPRA, but we are saying, we don't have a problem with the control process through the general practitioners and physicians. We don't have a problem. But don't go and put added pressure on them that they must make an application. This is a matter of life and death. 24 hours might be too late for a particular patient. Now, like you've heard earlier on, that 48%, so if 735 people died yesterday, it means half of those people we could have saved their life. And I can tell you some studies have shown that up to 83% drop they would have been in mortality. So the question is, it's not about the issue of the paper. And I agree that once you have dispensed of this drug, it is important to have the data, the effectiveness. It will help SAHPRA, it will help government, it will help us all over the world. But in the time of a pandemic we have right now, it is only appropriate.
All right, we have some technical difficulty there as Ahmed Mansoor Sheikh Imam was wrapping up his thought there. Professor Colleen, I'll give you the last word. I mean, as things stand right now, what does this mean in terms of accountability for the patient, but also for the doctors?
Sorry, is that question for me
for you. Yes,
or
for
Dr.
No, for you, Professor. Professor
Okay,
Colleen, for you.
Sorry, could you repeat
I'm saying in terms where things stand right now with the position that SAHPRA has taken, what does it mean as far as accountability or for the use of the drug on a patient? What are the rights of the patient and what are the rights of the doctors?
Well, all the accountability will lie with the doctor. If a patient gets the medication, they have to sign an informed consent, unlike any other prescription medicine. So the patient will have a choice whether to take the medication or not, and the doctor will be responsible for the ongoing care of that patient.
All right, Prof, we appreciate your time. Let's leave it there for today. Thank you very much, Professor Colleen Aldos, as well as Dr. Jose van Zyl and Member of Parliament, Ahmed Mansoor Sheikh Imam, with us tonight to help us through this conversation.